The evening rush at my studio was just starting to wind down when I heard the bell above the front door. I didn't look up right away. I was finishing a client's blowout, my hands moving on autopilot, and I'd learned over 3 years of running Ember Co. that whoever walked in after 6 on a Thursday could wait 30 seconds. The smell of keratin treatment was still hanging in the warm air, and Nora Jones was playing low through the speakers my business partner Helena had picked out when we first opened. Then I heard my mother's voice. "She's right there. Just wait, let me handle this." I met my own eyes in the mirror first. My client, a sweet woman named Mrs. Okafor who came every 3 weeks for a trim, noticed the change in my face before I could smooth it over. She reached up and touched my hand. "You okay, sweetheart?" I wasn't, but I told her I was. My mother hadn't called me in 2 years, 3 months, and 11 days. Not that I'd been counting. I'd stopped counting somewhere around the 8-month mark, when I finally accepted that the silence was intentional. She hadn't texted. She hadn't emailed. She'd blocked me on Facebook. I found out because my cousin mentioned seeing her post about my brother's new condo, and when I went to look, there was nothing. Just a wall where my mother used to be. And now, she was standing in the reception area of my salon in Kitchener, Ontario, wearing her good coat, the navy one she saved for important occasions. My older brother was behind her, and my father was holding a manila envelope. I should tell you about the 3 years before that evening because you need to understand what I walked into when I left. I'd been working at a commercial photography studio since I was 22, the kind of place that shoots product catalogs and corporate headshots and the occasional wedding for a client who books late and pays premium. I was good at it. My boss, a man who'd been running the studio for 27 years, told me I had an instinct for light that some photographers never develop. I worked 60-hour weeks. I drove a used Civic and ate a lot of rice and lentils and put every spare dollar into a savings account I called, embarrassingly, the Dream Fund. The dream was simple. I wanted to open my own place. Not a photography studio. As it turned out, somewhere along the way, I'd fallen in love with hair. I'd started doing cuts and colors out of my apartment on weekends, watching tutorials at midnight, taking courses at a beauty college in Waterloo while I worked my day job. Helena, who'd been a licensed stylist for 6 years and was exhausted from working for someone else, became my business partner over a series of long phone calls and one very serious spreadsheet. We found a space on King Street. We applied for a business loan through a federal small business program and we qualified. We signed a lease. We spent 8 weeks building out the interior ourselves. Helena's boyfriend at the time did drywall. I painted. We carried furniture up a narrow staircase on a Saturday in February while it was -15 outside. We opened Ember Co. in March 2 years after I'd started saving. The first week, we had 11 clients. By the 6th month, we had a waitlist. My family knew none of this. Not because I'd hidden it, I'd invited them to the opening. I'd called my mother 3 times in the weeks before to tell her about the lease, the loan, the plan. Each time, the conversation turned. My brother had just gotten a promotion. My father was thinking about retiring. My mother was worried about my brother's girlfriend. By the 3rd call, I understood I was background noise. They didn't come to the opening. No explanation. No text, not a single word. I stood at the door of my salon at 7 in the evening, watching Helena's family toast us with sparkling cider, and I felt the absence like something physical, like a missing step you don't expect until your foot goes through the air. A week later, my father called. Not to apologize. He called because my brother's business had collapsed. My brother had been running a contracting company, renovations, small commercial builds, that kind of work. He was talented with his hands and terrible with money, which is a combination that ends exactly the way you'd expect. He'd taken on a project in Cambridge, overextended, hired subcontractors he couldn't pay, and by October, he owed somewhere north of $80,000 to 3 different creditors. My father explained this to me in the same measured tone he used when he was telling me to clean my room as a child. Like the facts were neutral, like the outcome was already decided. "We need you to co-sign a line of credit," he said. "Your brother needs $40,000 to settle the worst of it. The bank won't extend to him anymore, but with your name on it and your credit history, I just took out a business loan," I said. "My debt-to-income ratio, this is family." Those 3 words, that's what he had. That's all he needed, apparently, because when I said I needed time to think, he said he'd give me until the weekend, and then he hung up. I didn't call back by the weekend. I called back on Monday, and I said no. I said it carefully. I said I loved my brother. I said I hoped he found a path through it. I said I was not in a position to co-sign anything that could put my business and my business partner at risk. I said all of this calmly, the way you practice saying something in the shower at 2 in the morning. My father said I was selfish. My mother said I had always put myself first. My brother didn't say anything. I heard him in the background. He didn't say a word. They hung up. And then, for 2 years, 3 months, and 11 days, nothing. I want to be honest about what that silence cost me, because I think people assume you get used to it. You don't. You build around it, the way a tree grows around a wire fence, incorporating the shape of the wound into the shape of yourself. I cried in my car a lot that first year. I called my cousin sometimes, late at night, and we'd talk about nothing until I felt human again. Helena knew something had happened with my family, but I never told her the whole story. I was ashamed, in the way you're ashamed of things that aren't your fault, but feel like they must be somehow. The salon kept growing. We hired a third stylist named Britt, who was fresh out of school and had more Instagram followers than Helena and I combined, which turned out to matter more than either of us had expected. We refinished the back wall, the dark green one that showed up in every photo. We started doing Saturday morning bookings that filled within minutes of going live. I also paid off my share of the business loan 18 months ahead of schedule, which my accountant described as unusual, and my bank described as unusual, and my bank described as excellent. I was quietly, stubbornly fine. And then, one Thursday evening in November, my mother walked through my door in her navy coat. Mrs. Okafor left with a gift card I pressed into her hand. Full credit. Come back next week. Please, I'm so sorry. Have a good night. She squeezed my fingers on her way out and didn't ask any questions. I will always be grateful for that. Britt was still with a client in the back. Helena had left at 5. It was just me and the three of them, standing in the reception area under the warm Edison bulb lighting that I had agonized over for weeks. My mother looked older. My brother looked the same. My father was holding the envelope like it was evidence. We should talk? My mother said. Okay, I said. I didn't hug anyone. I stood behind the reception desk, deliberately with my hands flat on the surface, and I waited. My father put the envelope on the counter. Your brother is back on his feet, he said. New company. He's doing well. He paused. But there are some outstanding matters. I looked at the envelope. I didn't touch it. The line of credit you co-signed in 2022, my father said. There's a balance remaining. $31,000. The room went very still. Or maybe that was just inside me. I didn't co-sign anything, I said. You did, my mother said. It's all there. Your signature. We needed it done quickly, and you weren't answering. I wasn't answering because I'd said no. I said no, and you stopped calling me. It was a family emergency, my father said. We made a decision. I picked up the envelope then. I opened it slowly. Inside was a loan agreement from a private lender, not a bank, a private lender, which told me everything, with my name printed in clean type and a signature on the line that was not mine. I have a very particular signature. I've had it since I was 16, a specific curl in the capital first letter that I developed deliberately, the way teenagers do. The signature on that document did not have the curl. This isn't my signature, I said. You need to calm down, my brother said. It was the first thing he'd said since they walked in. I am calm, I said, and I was. That's the part that surprised me most, how calm I actually was, because I had known, somewhere below the level of conscious thought, that something like this was possible. I had known it when my father said this is family and hung up the phone. I had filed that knowledge away and kept building my life, and now here it was, exactly as ugly as I'd suspected. This is a forged document, I said. Someone signed my name to a loan without my consent. That's fraud. That's identity theft under the criminal code. My father's jaw tightened. You're going to help us resolve this, he said. The lender is pressing now. There's interest. 31 becomes something else in 6 months. We're asking for 20% of this business. A stake, not a handout, until the debt is covered. 20% of my business, I repeated. It's reasonable. You're doing well. Anyone can see that. And if I say no, my mother leaned forward, we'll have to contact your landlord. Your lease is up for renewal in April. We know the building owner. We can make things complicated. She said it so gently. That was the thing about my mother. She always delivered the worst things gently. like she was doing you a favor by softening the edges of the knife. I looked at my brother. He looked at the floor. Give me until the end of the night, I said. I'm finishing up with my last client. Come back in an hour. My father nodded. My mother started to say something about staying, waiting inside. No, I said. Come back in an hour. When they left, I stood at the front window and watched their car idle for a moment before it pulled away. Then I picked up my phone. I called my lawyer first. I've had a business lawyer since the day we signed our lease. Helena insisted, and I will spend the rest of my life thanking her for that. I reached his voicemail and left a message explaining the situation in point form, the way he'd taught me to communicate. Forged signature. Private lender. Extortion. I used the word extortion because that's what it was, a demand for financial benefit under threat of interference with my business. In Canada, that's Section 346 of the Criminal Code, which I knew because I had, in fact, spent an evening some months ago looking up exactly this kind of scenario, because I had not forgotten what my father said when he hung up on me. Then I called Helena. She picked up on the second ring, mid-sentence about something her sister had done, and when I told her what had just happened, she went completely quiet in a way I'd never heard from her before. Helena is not a quiet person. Do you want me to come in? She said. No, I said. I need you to send me the name of that contact at the CPIC registry, the one your cousin used. She sent it within 2 minutes. Then I made one more call to a number I'd saved 8 months ago and never expected to use. A fraud investigator I consulted privately after I received a piece of mail about a credit inquiry I hadn't initiated. The inquiry had come from a private lender. I'd filed it away. I had documentation. I had documentation of everything. When they came back an hour later, Britt had gone home and the salon was quiet. I made tea. I don't know why, it just seemed like the right thing to do. To have something warm in my hands. I was sitting in one of the styling chairs when they walked in, which meant they had to stand. Small thing. It mattered to me. I've thought about your offer, I said. My father sat down on the bench by the door. My mother stayed standing. My brother was by the window. I'm not going to give you 20% of my business, I said. I'm not going to give you any part of it, but I want to be very clear about why, and I want you to understand what you've actually walked into tonight. My father started to speak. I'm not finished, I said, calmly. I set my phone on the counter between us. Screen up. 8 months ago, I received a credit inquiry I didn't initiate. I looked into it. It came from the same lender whose name is on the document you brought in tonight. I have a formal record of that inquiry, time-stamped, and I have a report I filed with Equifax at the time disputing any involvement with that lender. That stated 8 months ago. My mother's face changed slightly. Just slightly. I also have a fraud investigator I've been in contact with. Not because I knew exactly what was coming, but because I knew something was. And tonight, when you left, I left a message with my business lawyer documenting this conversation, including the threat about my landlord. And I filed an initial report with the RCMP non-emergency line. My brother turned away from the window. The document you brought in tonight has a forged signature, I said. Mine! That is identity theft. The demand for 20% of my business, backed by a threat to contact my landlord, is extortion. Both of those are criminal code offenses. I want you to understand that I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying it because it's true, and because if any of you contacts my landlord, my clients, my business partner, or anyone connected to this business, I will complete the reports I have already started. My father stood up. You do that to your own family, he said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. I protect something I built with my own hands, my own money, and my own credit, I said. Which is what you asked me not to do 2 years ago when you wanted me to put all of it at risk for someone who made decisions I had no part in. My brother finally looked at me, and here is the thing about that moment. I want to be honest about it, because I'm not sure I've ever said this out loud. When my brother looked at me, I saw that he knew. He had always known. He knew when they forged my name, and he knew when they came here tonight, and he was not a villain the way my father had started to seem in my head. He was someone who had let things happen because it was easier than stopping them, and that was its own kind of grief, separate from everything else. I didn't say any of that. I didn't have to. There is one more thing, I said. I reached under the counter and placed a second document beside my phone. I received a letter 3 weeks ago from the private lender. They were offering a discounted settlement on the account, 60 cents on the dollar, because the debt has been sitting long enough that they'd rather recover something than wait. I purchased that debt on Monday. Silence. What does that mean? My mother said quietly. It means I own the outstanding balance now. $31,000 minus the settlement discount, which I paid for my business line of credit. It means the lender is no longer your problem. I am. It means the collateral they held against the loan, which includes your car and a portion of the equity on the family home, is now something I have a claim on. My father sat back down. I'm not going to pursue it, I said. I want to be clear about that. I'm not calling in any debts. I'm not going to your door. I'm not going to do any of the things you were prepared to do to me tonight. But I need you to understand that I could. I need you to understand that I could. I need you to understand that I came here tonight prepared and you didn't, and that difference matters. I picked up my tea. It had gone cold. I think you should go home, I said. I think you should talk to a lawyer of your own about the forged document situation, not because I'm threatening to move forward, but because you should understand what exposure you have. And I think that if anyone in this family ever wants to have an actual conversation with me, a real one, where I'm not background noise, I'm open to that. But not tonight. My mother looked at me for a long time. I didn't know about the signature, she said finally. I don't know if that was true. I still don't know. I nodded because I couldn't say anything to that yet, and she pulled her coat closed and walked out. My father followed without speaking. My brother stopped at the door. I'm sorry, he said. 2 words. After 2 years, 3 months, and 11 days. I know, I said. Because I did. And because I also knew it wasn't enough yet, and he knew that too. And sometimes the most honest thing 2 people can do is stand in a doorway and acknowledge the size of what's between them without pretending it isn't there. He left. I locked the front door. I turned off the overhead lights and left only the warm ones on, the ones we kept on overnight for the plants on the windowsill. Helena had insisted on the plants too, and she was right about those as well. I sat back down in the styling chair and I looked at my salon, the dark green wall, the framed print Helena had picked up from a local artist at a market in Guelph, the shelf of products we tested for 6 months before stocking, the appointment book on the counter, full through January. I thought about my father saying, "This is family," like that phrase was a door and he was the only one who held the key to it. I thought about my mother in her navy coat, delivering threats gently. I thought about my brother looking at the floor, and then I called Helena. It's done, I said. Are you okay? I looked around at the room I had built. Yeah, I said, I really am. I turned off the last light, set the alarm, and walked out into the cold Kitchener night. It was the kind of November evening where you can see your breath and the streetlights make halos in the mist and everything feels very still and very clear. I drove home. I made real tea this time. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, not thinking about anything in particular, just being someone who had built something that couldn't be taken away. That's the part nobody tells you about. Not the confrontation, not the documents, or the lawyer, or the carefully prepared words. The part nobody tells you about is the drive home afterward, and the tea, and the quiet, and the feeling, not triumphant, not sad, just solid, of knowing exactly who you are and what you've done with your one life so far. I went to bed at a reasonable hour. In the morning, I opened my salon. People ask me sometimes what the hardest part was. They expect me to say the confrontation, the moment my father put that envelope on the counter, or the moment my mother delivered her threat in that soft, reasonable voice she's always had. But the hardest part wasn't any of that. The hardest part was the 2 years before, when I had to decide over and over again every ordinary Tuesday whether I was going to let the silence mean something was wrong with me. It didn't. That took a long time to understand in my body, not just my head. What I know now is that the choices I made in those 2 years, the ones that felt small and private and unwitnessed, were actually everything. Every loan payment I made ahead of schedule. Every Saturday morning I came in early to prep the salon before Britton and Helena arrived. Every time I chose to build something instead of sitting with the grief of what my family had taken from me when they went quiet. Those choices accumulated, they became a floor I could stand on. And when my father walked in with a forged document and a threat, I was standing on something solid and he wasn't. That's the thing about how consequences actually work. Not in some abstract cosmic sense. Just practically in real life. The decisions people make don't disappear, they compound. My brother made a series of decisions about his business, and they compounded into $80,000 of debt and a collapsed company. My parents made a decision to use my name without my consent, and that decision didn't go away just because 2 years passed. It was sitting there, documented, time-stamped, waiting. And the decision I made to consult a fraud investigator 8 months before that evening to file a dispute with Equifax to save every piece of paper, that decision was also sitting there, waiting. I think about Helena a lot when I think about that night. She didn't know the whole story. I was too ashamed to tell her, which is its own lesson about how we carry things we didn't cause. But she was the one who insisted we get a business lawyer before we signed our lease. She was the one who pushed for the plants on the windowsill, which sounds like nothing, but what she was actually doing was insisting that the space feel like somewhere worth protecting. Her instincts were right about all of it. There's something innate about the people you choose to build things with, how their wisdom becomes part of the structure even when they don't know they're contributing it. I'm not angry at my brother the way I thought I would be. When he said he was sorry, standing in the doorway, I believed him. I also knew it wasn't enough yet, and that we'd both have to live with the distance for a while longer before anything real could happen between us. That's not punishment. It's just how repair actually works, slowly on both sides, when both sides are ready. What I keep coming back to is this: I didn't win that evening because I was clever, or because I had the right documents, or even because I'd anticipated what was coming. I got through it intact because I had spent 2 years becoming someone who didn't need their approval to know her own worth. That's the only thing that was actually unassailable. Not the legal position, not the purchase debt, not the prepared words. Just the fact that I had built something real with my hands and my credit and my judgment, and I knew it down to the bones. You can't take that from someone. That's the part they miscalculated.